Hey, it's Mike. Thanks for tuning back in. Tuesday, I guess, right? Days seem to just flow together. Last night I did an interview with Kurt over at Basketball Card Nerd. I linked to it in my community post last night, or not to the interview, but to his channel. Go subscribe there. He said he'd have it up today. Probably by the time I post this video, it will be posted. It was fun. It was a really good time meeting Kurt and having a conversation about collecting with him. It's fun just talking about cards and collections, and he had some good questions about my channel. So yeah, go check that out when it posts. Basketball Card Nerd is his channel name. Today I wanted to talk about the mantle, 52 Topps mantle. CSG, been in business now just about 2 years. I think next month marks 2 years. They graded the mantle, 52 Topps, a CSG-8, and it just sold for $1.25 million. Their first card to ever sell for more than $1 million. So, big deal. And I thought, well, I wonder how this compares to PSA sales. Now, I didn't go into SGC because PSA, as we know, brings the most value. Let's face it, no matter what you think about PSA, it brings the most value. And the SGC, of course, 9.5, the finest known example, sold for $12.6 million over the summer, I think it was. But I'm just going to look at PSA 8s to start here. This one sold, this was a Type 1, and I don't think PSA differentiates between Type 1 and Type 2. Type 1 means that like the yellow ink bleeds in underneath the nameplate, and it also has different seam on the back, the baseball on the back. The seams are in different directions. I think those are the key things that differentiate Type 1 and Type 2. But PSA doesn't say that on theirs like CSG does, and neither does SGC. So I think this might be one of those ways that CSG is trying to differentiate themselves. I'm not sure. This mantle sold at SCP auctions over the weekend. The interesting thing about this is that it was in another company's slab before a private collector who owned it crossed it over to CSG. Now, whose slab would you have that in to have the nerve to cross it over? Now, you had to, I think crossover implies that you've submitted it in the slab, right? But would you do that with a PSA? Maybe what they did is maybe it was in PSA slab, because I would think you would want to grade it with PSA. Maybe it was in PSA and it was a 7.5 or an 8, or 7 or 7.5, and they said we want to cross this over, but they put a minimum grade of like 7.5 in. Now this brings up a question about, would CSG say, okay, PSA has a 7.5, and they don't want to reholder it in a CSG unless it's an 8. So we can nudge this up half a grade. I'm sure they wouldn't, but these are the questions that I ask myself, because CSG wants this publicity. This is how grading companies get a lot of publicity. This is how they get more submissions, more revenue. And so it just makes me wonder. And I'm not accusing them of that at all. I just think, boy, would they upgrade a card by half of a grade knowing they're going to get a ton of publicity over it? As I said, this was the first $1 million CSG card, and it went by over $250,000 over. So let's look at some PSAs. PSA 8, 10 months ago, February of 2022, sold at Heritage Auctions for $1.56 million. So about $250,000 more than this one, but also right in that boom time, right in the peak of the market. Also appeared to be a Type 1, and I'm not an expert in Type 1 versus Type 2, or really anything, but it looks like a Type 1 to me. Another one, PSA 8, sold October 2021 in Golden Auctions for $2 million. Just a hair over $2 million. Appeared to be a Type 2. I don't know if there's more value. I'm actually going to stop mentioning the type. And then in June of 2021, one sold in Memory Lane Auctions for $2.1 million. So you got that peak up there of $2.1 million at the end of last year, 2021. And then they started to come down at the beginning of this year to me, it seems reasonable that a card would go from 1.56 million 10 months ago, based on this market, another $250,000 down to 1.25 million. I think this is a pretty good result for CSG. Now, does this mean CSG cards are just as valuable as PSA? No. This is much more, to me, about the card than it is about the holder. Mantle cards are going to go up long term, no matter what. Well, not no matter. If you put it in a GMA slab, you're probably not going to do as well. But Mantle is what drives this price. It's still very interesting to me. I'm surprised it did as well as it did in a CSG holder. And I think CSG is a very good grading company. They're actually notoriously tough on grades. There's some anecdotal evidence that they've come down a little bit on how tough they are in the latter half of this year. But their holders, they improved them over the summer, I think it was, or maybe the spring. Very, very improved, although the labels are still gigantic. So these PSA 8s were going for about $500,000 before the pandemic, even a little less, like $350,000, up to about $600,000, roughly $500,000 before the boom hit. And then starting in January of 2021, they started hitting $1 million. And then, of course, that $2 million midway through 2021. So big spike once the boom hit. PSA 7.5 has actually never been more than $705,000, surprisingly. And that was this year, August of 2022. So this person may have said, you know, this is a 7.5 in PSA, and a 7.5 PSA only goes for $700,000, and probably a little bit less now. So let's see if we can get an 8 in another company. And I wonder if they actually went to SGC first, and SGC said, nah, we're not going to crack this for you and improve the grade. These are the things I think about. Maybe I'm crazy. Let me know in comments. Do you think about these things too? And I don't think it's shady to say, well, maybe a little bit. But again, I'm not accusing CSG of that. It just makes me wonder. This CSG 8 actually sold for more money than any PSA 8.5 has ever sold at auction, but no 8.5 has sold at auction since the boom started. Last one was, I think, 2018. So that's all. I think it's interesting to look at CSG. I've watched some videos about CSG values versus SGC and PSA and BGS, and they're not there yet, of course. I think that they have the potential to be because they are a legitimate company. They're a quality grader. They have good customer service, but they're not there yet. But this Mantle gives me hope that maybe we have a fourth company that can get you value. I don't know. Send me some links to some videos where people have recently, like the latter half of this year, compared values of each of the slabs equally. Thanks very much for watching. I'll be back again tomorrow with another daily video.